Hello and welcome to the MAC weather page for this Wednesday, November 15th, and we have our winter outlook coming up here in just a moment. If we take a look at some of the headlines here, we're definitely going to go into a rather active period beginning today with lots of wind and rain here over the next several days. Two separate systems, one for today into tonight, and then the bigger system will come in for later Friday into Saturday. And overall, we could see quite a bit of rainfall and a lot of wind. And the headlines would be rain showers and then wind, maybe a few snow showers as this system ends. And then we look at our next system that'll come in for Friday and Saturday. That'll bring more high winds. Again, the storm doesn't look as powerful as it did because it's going to deeply intensify, but more so when it gets past lower Michigan. But certainly there's still going to be a lot of wind and a lot of rain. And we have gale warnings. I think the big difference is we're talking about some potential wind advisories maybe with the late week system. Whereas I think if it would have developed about 24 hours sooner in its intensification state, we'd probably be looking at high wind warnings for much of the state and storm force warnings on the Great Lakes. As it is, gale warnings are flying across the Great Lakes. I was seeing that the Lake Huron could actually see winds and waves anywhere up to 14 feet with occasional waves as high as 18 feet. So pretty significant storms going to be moving through the Great Lakes here this weekend. And then colder with snow showers as that system moves out of the area for late week. As far as precipitation, over the next 5 days through Sunday, we're forecasting about 1 inch to as much as 1.40 inches, and that would be the average of the 13 weather stations across the MAC and the LAC network area. And we could see some local amounts, possibly as much as 2 inches. So again, pretty significant weather coming our way, and we'll track that here all week long into the weekend. And again, my forecast range on the average, we want to see this number here someplace in between 1 to 1.4 inches. And again, we'll track all the different locations and their amounts here through this storm. And now for the 2017-2018 winter forecast, and the headlines is let it snow, let it snow. And I think there is a potential we could see quite a bit of snowfall. If we look at the analog months that we used on my preliminary winter outlook, you can see these were the years. And again, we look at a number of factors when we come up with the analogs. Probably number one would be the INSO event, El Nino or La Nina, and the also, we look at the North Atlantic Oscillation, the Atlantic Oscillation, as well as the ocean waters of the Pacific, especially in the northern Pacific from the Gulf of Alaska down to the west coast of the U.S. And now with the newest one, we can see these are the new analog years. That includes a few years from the 1990s and 1950, 1951, and we've dropped some of these years. Two of these years were a little bit warmer than normal. One was colder, and as far as snowfall amounts, one of them was very snowy, but two of them were below normal as far as snowfall, so kind of a wash there. And if we look at the most important factor when we consider the INSO is usually the enclose, INSO 1, 2, or 3.4, and the maps will show you are the 3.4. This was last month. You can see the forecasted for the winter months, we would be in a weak La Nina to potentially a very significant strong one. But again, looks like that's continuing to be the case. And the only difference in the trend is not quite as steep of a rise as we get towards next summer, towards El Nino, but certainly we could see that coming on here maybe over the next 12 months or so. And if we look at the water currents, this was a very favorable setup last year for a cold and snowy winter across the central and eastern U.S. But the problem is we had a lot of cold water that kept expanding. We had a very, very bitterly cold Asian winter and our summer and fall, and as the winter began, just horribly cold conditions, and that helped to cool the Pacific waters as they then traveled to the east into the central and eastern Pacific. This year, however, we see an expanding. This is a month ago, and we'll flip this back and forth, and you'll notice how this whole area basically becomes warmer just in the last month. And you can see how we go back to last month and then to this month, last month, this month, and you can see the significance of the warmth, and that certainly has a chance to promote this high. We also have a blocking pattern. Looks like it's going to set up over Greenland, and that's also good for the potential for a cold and snowy eastern U.S. And if we look at the forecast for the INSO event, You can see earlier, about a month ago, you can see it looked like we'd be mainly in a neutral pattern, but you notice how I got it on the weaker side towards La Nina versus over here on the stronger side. And as we looked at the potential for us going into a La Nina, the best chances were during the winter months, with a little bit less chance it would go the other way. And now you can see the most recent outlook. We are now in a La Nina, and a very strong chance it will continue that way right on through pretty much the entire winter. And then we may transition back again to the neutral. Almost no chance that we would see us heading towards an El Nino anytime soon. So that's a good favorable pattern again for a cold and snowy eastern U.S. And what does a typical La Nina winter outlook pattern look like? Jet stream diving in. We have a good chance to see a lot of these Texas Panhandle storms, also Denver type storms that will come in and affect again the Great Lakes. Looks like we're in a prime condition to be wetter than normal, or in this case snowier than normal as we look now. But I think the biggest thing, we're not going to be terribly cold, I don't believe. I think we're going to see this cold be more concentrated out into the plains and into Canada, and boy, we certainly have seen all the snow cover in Canada, so that makes a lot of sense there. But what we are going to be is in the big battle zone. We should be on the colder side more often than not. Certainly we'll have warm-ups, but more often than not we're going to be on the cold side of a very stormy pattern. And again, that's good news for winter across much of the Northeast and into the Great Lakes. And if we look at the North Atlantic Oscillation, the cold phases, you can see this also has the ridge over the top, and that usually is good news for cold and stormy conditions just on the below that. And again, that's a favorable pattern as well. If it moves just a little bit farther west, that would actually, I think, mean even more cold and snow for the Great Lakes. But right now, this is a good pattern set up. And what does that pattern often look like? Deep troughs across the center of the nation, and at the base of the trough, these powerful storms develop and move up towards the Great Lakes or move up towards the Appalachians or the East Coast. Again, the busiest portion of the U.S. is going to be, I think, right in the Great Lakes area, whether it be big snowstorms or possibly even rainstorms. Again, it's all independent on where each storm goes, and some years you get lucky and some years you don't. As far as what the analog years look like around here, I had some more snowfall totals. I cannot find those for these 2 years. But again, we have the #1 and the #5 snowiest years we've ever recorded here in Breckenridge in this analog package, along with overall just a little bit colder than normal conditions for the most part. And if we look at the National Weather Service in Detroit, at some of the areas of Detroit, those 2 years show up as #7 and #10. In Flint, they show up as #9 and #10. And in Saginaw, it shows up as the 4th and the 5th snowiest months ever. Again, these snow totals you can see in the 70-inch range and 60-inch range, even at Detroit. So at least 2 of those years bode quite well for a lot of snow. Some of the years are a little bit below normal, and most of them, though, are just a little bit above normal. And you can see the NOAA's outlook. This was last month. I'm still waiting on the new one, but you can see that generally agrees with the analog package, showing the coldest air coming in from the northwest towards the Great Lakes, where the battle zone then begins. And you can see that makes sense with the battle zone. We see a lot of precipitation, and again, everything right now is pointing to a very wet winter. If we look at the Weather Bell's outlook for temperatures last month, or their previous forecast for the winter had the normal line cutting right through mid-Michigan. And again, we would be in the battle zone on that, obviously. And then now they've just updated it, showing even a colder look to the forecast for the winter months of December, January, and February. Again, I think had they seen the latest European outlook for Detroit, they might have left the forecast like this. But they certainly are going with a colder outlook. And as far as snowfall, they haven't changed that. You can see Michigan and much of the Great Lakes right in the heart of where we expect the heaviest snowfall accumulations for the winter coming up. And again, so my forecast is looking for temperatures compared to last month when I issued my preliminary. I think I had -1.6, so I'm siding a little bit with the European model just because of its tendency to be a much higher scoring system. But I'm also looking at NOAA, and then also taking in consideration the colder weather bell outlook. But we'd still be below normal. And as far as snowfall goes, I've increased that from around 52.5 to 55 inches of snow I expect. And again, that would be 15 inches above normal. So again, we'd be pushing over 4.5 feet of snow. And again, if for a successful forecast, I want to be in that 50 to 60 or 52 to 58 inch range, and I would consider that a good forecast. So it looks like potentially a very snowy winter coming up. Thanks for stopping by and have yourself a great day, and 73s to all.